There's a few interesting things about dreams, and first of them is the fact that they're so difficult to remember. And if they weren't so difficult to remember, discuss them a lot more and have a lot more understanding of them. So there's a mysterious element of dreams. We know we go there, we know we experience them almost every night, and yet we remember practically nothing about them. It's almost similar to people talking about alien abductions. Although I think most of these, I think all these alien abductions, every single one of them is some form of hallucination or dream that people have had. They somehow hallucinated or dreamed this experience. I just don't believe that, because just the physical realities. Now maybe I'm wrong, but maybe everything I know is wrong. But anyhow, the point about dreams is that it's sort of like that. We know we get beamed into another reality each night, and yet we come back with practically our entire memory erased. So that's the first thing about dreams. But then that only makes it more of a challenge to try to remember as much as we can about dreams. And when you do that, you do start to remember a little bit more. And you do sort of become aware in your dreams that you're trying to remember, you're trying to preserve the memory of that experience while you're in it. Somehow, subconsciously, you're thinking, I have to remember this. And that in itself can help you a little bit to remember more. Now, sometimes dreams are just elements of your own life, people that you know, places that you know, situations that you're in, and they all just get mixed up and swirled around so that it's like a kaleidoscope. It's familiar elements put in different arrangements. And sometimes you find yourself in some situation that's not familiar. And sometimes it seems so detailed and real that you wake up thinking, or even during the time you're thinking, why am I seeing this? This is like no place that I've ever been to, and yet it seems very specific and real. And I've definitely had that happen. When it really is a specific sort of place that I've never even seen a photograph of before, and yet it looks like I could take a photograph of it, and it would definitely match someplace somewhere that I have no way of knowing where this place would be. And every once in a while, I find myself in a place that I haven't been in reality, when I'm awake. I go to some place I've never been before, and then suddenly, just for a second, I look at it and I say, wait a second. I'm certain I've seen this in a dream. One of those dreams where I said, why am I seeing this place that I've never been to? And here I am several years later. I'm sure it was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that I had that dream, and here I am. And just for a second, you get that sensation. I saw this before. I was here in a dream. And then after a second, it fades. You know that you had that sensation, but you look back at this place that you're looking at, and you don't have that sharp sensation. Just for a moment you have it. So there's the question, just because the sensation only lasts a second, does that mean it's not real? Just because you can't remember 99% of what you just dreamed when you wake up, does that mean that you didn't dream it? Certainly you did. But there's tricks of memory and inability, certain types of thought that are not easy to preserve in your memory. So most dreams are that way, and that sensation of, wait a second, I've seen this place before. The fact that it doesn't last doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't real and sharp when you experience it. So I suppose the most interesting thing for me is that about dreams. The most interesting thing is this notion that maybe, just maybe, the dreams do provide a glimpse into other times and places, and at the very least into other times and places that we personally will experience, in our own personal experience, because that's when it hits you, is when, if you have that dream and it's something that will happen in your own personal future, then later, when you're there in that place, that's when it hits you. Well, wait a second, I've seen this before. Now, if you saw images in your dreams of something in the future that you won't personally experience, then that situation won't come up. You'll feel in your dream, wow, this seems to be very real, but you'll never, when you're awake, you won't find yourself in that situation where it hits you like, wow, I've seen this before, because it's something that you won't see, so you won't be there personally to verify it. And of course, if it's something that you're seeing in your dream that's from the past, if it's from your own past, you'll just wake up and say, well, that was just a memory. It wasn't necessarily me, my visions and the dreams traveling back in time. It was just a memory. It was just accessing something that's already in my brain. But because we accept that as part of our notion of consciousness, that the brain stores memories like an album of photographs that we can go back to at any time. But the notion that we can store memories of the future is a whole different story that we're not quite prepared to understand at this point, if there is anything to understand. So the question is there anything to understand? Is there a possibility that maybe there is an ability to foresee the future? We'd have to come to an understanding of what time is, but if in our waking experience we can verify sometimes that we do actually see things in our waking experience that we had previewed, we had foreseen in dreams long before we could have ever had any rational basis for having seen this. If you see a place, if you see a person or some object in your dream, and then several years later you find yourself seeing that precise same person or place or thing, then that is a basis for trying to understand how would that be possible. I don't have the answers. If I had the answers, I'd be telling you. All I have is just vague questions. But these are the questions I have. And even beyond that, even if we would say, well, that's somehow that can be dismissed as not real, dreams remain interesting because of a number of things. For one thing, how are they created? Even if it's just created out of images in our own memories, like a kaleidoscope. Even so, how and why? Why does the brain do this? That in itself is a question that remains a valid question no matter what conclusions you draw about dreams. The question about how and why does the brain do this? How and why does the brain create situations where somebody that you know is saying something that they've never said to you, and you're going to some place that you've been to, but it's not the same as it is in waking reality. Why does your brain do this? Why does your brain create situations and plots and little stories where you talk to somebody and this thing happens and they say this thing and then something turns into something else? Why? Why does your brain do this? And the other thing that definitely hits you most of the time when you're in a dream and seems to quickly fade when you wake up from it, but that seems to be the main attraction of trying to remember, is that dreams do give you a different perspective. It's like if you get in an airplane and you're flying above the earth, which people do every day. Not a moment of your life passes that people are not flying in an airplane and looking down below them. And you have a different perspective of the same world that you live in all the rest of your time. And you might go on one airplane trip in your whole life. And for the span of an hour or two, you're looking down on the same planet that you live your whole life on, and from a completely different perspective than you see it for the rest of your life. And yet it's a real perspective. And the fact that the airplane will touch down again and you'll get off the airplane and find yourself back on solid ground, looking around you from the same perspective that you do every day. For the span of an hour or two, you were up looking down at that same world from a different perspective. And that's how dreams seem to be. They help us look at our life from a different perspective. And that might be a different perspective of time, or a different perspective of attitude. You might see things in your dreams that you're used to accepting in your normal daily life, but in your dreams suddenly you realize these things are very disturbing. You somehow see things from a different angle. Looking at things from a different angle, things that we tend to accept and expect, we suddenly look at it from another side and see that it is really pretty disturbing. And sometimes it is disturbing enough that we wake up trying to close our mind to it, because wait a second, my mind just opened up to some aspect of reality that I don't even want to have to think about. And we prefer to go on viewing life in the attitude of reality that we've perhaps fabricated for ourselves. We set up this reality to look a certain way, sort of like the scenery in a play, where you might paint scenery on backgrounds of cardboard to make it look like the stage will look like it's a certain type of room, but in reality it's just painted cardboard. And we try to focus usually on being the audience and watching the play and accepting the image as being what it's supposed to project. But every once in a while you might go backstage and see that the image that we want to believe when we watch the play is not the reality. The reality is just these bits of painted cardboard on a stage. And sometimes in our dreams we see our lives from that more realistic perspective. We see how much what we take to be our real lives are just a painted scenery on a stage. And it's not really real, it's just an illusion. And this is the sort of reality that we usually try to close our minds to. We try to wake up from and shake it off and and not think about it. And maybe that's why we don't remember dreams. Maybe from the very early childhood, our minds recognize that what we see in dreams is more disturbing because it's a more real perspective on life, and in order just to get through our lives as young children, we make a conscious or subconscious decision. We're not even going to consider these thoughts that are disturbing, shake them off, and just go back when you wake up and open your eyes in the morning, just to accept the images of what we see around us at face value, and not to look underneath and behind them, because then we'd realize the whole thing is just an illusion, and it's kind of rather disturbing. And that may be the actual origin of our inability to remember dreams. It may be a deliberate, intentional effort on our parts not to see behind the illusion. And yet we find ourselves being reminded throughout our lives, each night when we go to sleep, sometimes more intensely than others, of just how much of our existence really is merely an illusion. And that's the sort of thing that we wake up as adults thinking or feeling, maybe, gosh, if only I could remember this might be a significant change in perspective, and I might be able to actually approach my life differently if I could just consciously remember the sensations that I've been through in my dreams. But our minds are so conditioned to immediately blot these things out that it's almost impossible to retrieve those perspectives. And maybe if we did, maybe we would tend to be driven a little bit more insane. Maybe some of the people who are branded as being insane are in fact the people, some of them who are more able to retain the understanding of life that most of us only experience briefly in our dreams at night. Maybe some people who do retain this information do end up being seemingly insane because they've seen a different side of existence that the rest of us spend our lives blotting out. Anyhow, that's all I have to say about dreams right now, and I'm sure it's more than enough.